Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our ROC Talk. It's a big crowd today, so this is really awesome. Just waiting for people to get joined up. There are we. Perfect. All right, just because we have a lot to cover and the presentation looks amazing, I'm going to get started as we let people in. So my name is Chelsea Graham. I'm the program coordinator with Recovery on Campus Alberta, and I am delighted to introduce Sogand, I'll share a little bit more about her in a moment. I'm just going to quickly do a land acknowledgement. So right now, I'm coming from the University of Calgary, which is located in the heart of Southern Alberta. And they both acknowledge and pays tribute to the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7, which include Blackfoot Confederacy, comprised of the Siksika, the Piikani, the Kaurna First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nations, and the Stoney Nakoda, which includes Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney First Nations. The city of Calgary is known as Malkinstis and is also the home of the Métis Nation of Alberta, which is Districts 5 and 6. A little quick blurb about ROC. Recovery on Campus is an initiative that was born from the UCalgary Recovery Community, which is a community that seeks to create inclusive spaces, safe spaces for people who are seeking, or curious about recovery on campuses across here at the University of Calgary. And my job is to scale that initiative to the 26 publicly funded schools in Alberta. And now, I don't know how to say your last name, but I'm just going to say your first name. So Sogand is an Iranian Canadian mental health professional, intersectional content creator, and trauma-informed influencer. She holds a master's degree in counseling, a bachelor's degree in psychology and sociology, with special training in health and wellness, lifestyle coaching, and cyber-counselling. Sogand has recently completed her Religious Doctorate Degrees in Pastoral Counselling and Religious Studies, and has frequented a mental wellness columnist as a mental wellness columnist for mainstream Canadian news agencies such as CBC Edmonton and CTV News. As the founder and director of SZ Wellness Incorporated, Sogand uses her professional expertise and extensive academic background to conduct wellness sessions and facilitate workshops centered on psychosocial healing and growth. Further than this, with over 1 million followers across social media platforms, Sogand provides psychoeducational content to local, national, and international audiences. And she has asked me kindly to say, if you could just take a minute and put in the chat why you're here today, where you're here from, and what you would like to get out of this workshop today. And then I'm going to share my screen and you can take it over. Maybe. There we go.
Yay. Okay, my turn. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. So, Chelsea, we're on the last slide. We got to go to the first slide. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. It's such an honor. This is my second time presenting with University of Calgary, but my first time presenting with ROC. So I'm very excited to be here. This is such an important topic because it is a topic that we are everybody, I think, on this planet touched with. And I'm just really excited to have so many of you here. And I will go through this, but the way I present is I want it to be interactive. So please feel free to put your hand up or unmute yourself if you have something to say. I want this to be interactive because I don't want to be feeling like I'm talking at you, I'm talking to you. And as for the way this is going to go, it's going to start off a little gloomy because we're going to go through with the socialization, internalization of body image and how that impacts your mental health. And so you're going to see a lot of quotes, you're going to see a lot of quotations, you're going to see a lot of research that's being done in this area. And then it's going to become a little bit more positive. And then at the end, I will leave you with a surprise that Chelsea already knows about, and I'm also going to leave you with some resources that you can leave hopefully feeling better than the gloomy research that we're going to go through. You will also see that there is a lot of quotes that I have here because I wanted to make sure that the research is presented in their words and not my words. And so I'm going to be going through a lot of quotes. And Chelsea said she likes this presentation. I hope you like it too. I spent 12 hours straight on it yesterday because I needed to match my outfit. And here we are. So I'm very excited. So now we can start. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to start off with the socialization of body image. So a resource that I will have at the end of this and references is Moo and Woo 2020. It's so good. It is so good if you want to read more about this, but we're just going to get into it. So we know that social standards of beauty, they're not static, right? They are completely changing, and that is what makes it so difficult, is that they are ever changing. And so it's really difficult for the masses at any time to actually be able to apply them into their lives. And that is done so there will always be the elite that can actually apply, and those standards of beauty actually apply to them and they're included in that club, and then the majority aren't. And so that means that there's spectrums of acceptability and there's spectrums of undesirability. And because of the inconsistency, it impacts folks' mental health because folks know that they are being shunned and being ostracized by the communities in which they reside. And not being able to meet these actually impacts you in, I like to call, a biopsychosocial dysphoria. And so it's going to impact you in medical spaces. It's going to impact you in psychiatric spaces. It's going to impact you in social spaces. It's going to impact you online and offline, within relationships. You name it, it's going to impact you. And so that's really important because if you don't treat it, then it's going to impact you even worse. And what happens with untreated mental health, as we know, unfortunately, if you don't treat mental health, it results in chronic fatigue, chronic stressors. There's a book that if you'd like to read about the impact of chronic stress, it's called The Cortisol Connection. It's from the early 2000s. And I really love it when medical professionals write books, but they try to apply psychosocial theory and psychosocial facts and stats. So it's called The Cortisol Connection. And that shows you how much of weight gain is actually stress induced, how much of weight gain, there's so much influence on losing weight, a specific weight, a number on the scale. But I don't know if you've noticed, but the ads that we're consuming about weight loss, like Jenny Craig, or I don't really even know what's popular right now, but any of those ads, very seldom do they talk about the mental health aspect of why people can't lose weight. The focus is always on the weight, but people aren't talking about how weight gain is actually, a lot of it is actually because of prolonged and chronic stress. And when we have things like recession and inflation, and I know that we have politicians talking about how bad our rent increases are. That's stressful. And so if people are gaining weight and you want to really help the masses, focusing on the weight is not helpful. Maybe we should focus on a holistic way of why people are gaining weight if they want to lose weight. Weight is being, and numbers on the scale and measurements are being created to be the monster. But what they really are is, like, we're going to use an analogy of my plants. What they really are is like those leaves. Those leaves. They're not the branch, they're not the roots, And so if we really want to tackle this issue of weight, and I keep talking about weight because we know, like, when we talk about body image, that's a big one, right? We can't tackle the leaves. I keep doing this, but you can't see my hand. Leaves, without looking at the root system. If any of you have plants, you know that the leaves sometimes indicate what's going on in the root system and in the branches. But until you see what's going on, you're not going to be able to treat, the leaves. Similarly to weight. That's just one of the many, 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 discrepancies when we talk about, health, it's always the leaves and not, the branch and the root system. I hope that makes sense. So these social messagings are instructed through a plethora of ways. The first one being upbringing and socioeconomic status. It's so important to recognize that not everybody has access to the same resources. So if you are growing up in an environment in which you don't have access to resources, you can't get the organic food that's the best for you. You can't get access to organic fruit. You don't have access to extracurricular activities. Your parents can't afford to put you in sports. They can't afford to get you, not fast food, because we know fast food is oftentimes cheaper than a, a gallon of milk that right now is probably $7. Going to a fast food joint and getting a meal for your whole family might be cheaper than getting groceries. And so that is going to have an impact on your body image, right? It's inequality. And so when we talk about body image, we need to mention the socioeconomic status that folks are coming from, as well as the upbringing. If you are born into a culture that is fat phobic, if you are born into a culture that is colorist, if you are born into a culture that diminishes your existence just as a person, of course you're going to have body image issues throughout your life. Secondly, peers, family, and partners. Oftentimes, we surround ourselves with people who validate our internal narrative. And if our internal narrative is coming from a place of, you know, negativity, it's very, very likely that we're going to attract partners, attract friends that validate that negativity. That's that, I know you probably heard of law of attraction, but that applies here. Until you do the healing work to break that cycle, you're going to consistently find yourself in patterns in which your partners are shaming you for the same things that your parents shamed you for the same things that the cultures that you're in shamed you for. So that's that. Culture, tradition, and religion. I say religion because I am a religious person, and we know that in a lot of religious places there is this push for purity and this push for innocence that is going to impact your body image if that's not the kind of lifestyle that you have. Similarly to culture and tradition, you can't separate that from people. You got to see people as a package deal. So when we see these like 10-second, 15-second clips, you know, talking about weight loss but no history on the person. And I understand they can't give like a 3-hour biography of the person if it's it's a commercial. But I just want you to check in with yourself when you see this kind of social programming, and check in and be like, I don't even know that person's socioeconomic status. I don't know that person's upbringing. I don't know why it was difficult for them to gain weight or lose weight. So why am I being instructed and indoctrinated to aspire to be like them? You know what I mean? Because we know with body image there's social comparison. We're going to get to that too. Okay. Height and weight restrictions. Here we're talking about the fact that there are social norms in regards to weight. I have a family member who's on bed rest, and I was visiting with this person the other day, and I just noticed that there was a sticker on the bed. So this person's on bed rest, so they're on a hospital bed, and it said up to, I think it was like 250 kilograms or something, a specific weight. So I was just thinking to myself, if somebody's 251 kilograms, are there beds for that? Is that a specific bed that they have to get? That was just like in my head. We also know that in the medical system and in the psychiatric system, there's a lot of fat phobia. I have so many clients that tell me that they don't like going to the doctors to get blood work done or to get vitamins or literally anything, because more often than not, the doctors will be like, have you tried losing weight? And it's I laugh about it because I don't know what else to do. It's not funny actually, but sometimes you got to use humor to cope with life, because unfortunately what that does, though, on a serious note, is that it excludes people who don't have a specific body type, you know what I mean, to even get medical support. So that's what I'm talking about there. And that's also what I'm talking about when I say medical and psychiatric influence. And gym culture and diet culture. Here we're talking about, you know, we're talking about folks that don't go to the gym because there are people, I don't know if you've seen it on social media, that record people in bigger bodies at the gym just to make fun of them, just to go viral. So there's a lot of influence in that regard too, unfortunately. Another thing is that diet culture, you know, a lot of diets don't take into account people's socioeconomic status, right? There's a lot of people that won't take into account that a lot of people are on, they get their food from food stamps, or they get it from food banks. They can't, have these beautiful meal prepped, items that are a specific number price a month. They can't access that. So there's a lot of intersectionality that needs to be applied for people who actually care about health and body image. But hopefully, as you see now, there's a trend of people pretending to care in the socialization of body image, but they don't. So when you see that, you can check in with yourself and be like, this sounds like it's for profit, doesn't sound like it's for me. Okay, next slide, please. So taking it one step further now into the psychology of body image, here we're talking about the fact that oftentimes, and there are studies that demonstrate this, what we see when we see ourselves is actually inaccurate. Sometimes we see that we are bigger or smaller than what we actually are, and that there is a perception issue, and that what we're seeing is actually kind of deceptive sometimes because we have internalized those messages. So if you have grown up in a culture or in a family or in an upbringing in which you are consistently body shamed, naturally when you see yourself in the mirror, that's going to have an impact unless you break that cycle. And we'll talk about how you can break that cycle. But visual sensitivity does impact folks' body image. It really does, especially when there's so much stimuli of inputting this, negative socialization, as we just talked about, in our everyday. I was just talking about commercials, but it's on social media. It's if you go grocery shopping, you know how there's always those magazines. It'll be like, watch them drop 70 pounds in 1 month. Like it's everywhere. It's everywhere. I know, like, my dad and I went through like a phase where I wanted to get carrot juice and like carrot juice is expensive if you just like want to go and buy it. So I wanted to like actually make it. So we got this blender situation, and on it there's a sticker that says, "Are you nearly dying in fat? Make juicing a part of your everyday." And I was like, because that's really going to make me want to drink carrot juice every day now. So naturally, I had to rip it off. But that right there can be a barrier right there. So that's the psychology, is that there's actually science being done on the fact that what we see reflects more how we feel. It's not always the reality. Okay, that's very important. Next slide, please. Okay, so with this, what we see, and it reflecting not really the reality. There is, negative narrative that can be created internally, but also externally about your self worth and self value. So, with this negative, internal viewpoint, here we're talking about the fact that you might be starting to get dissatisfied with life. Really losing on that serotonin and dopamine that life could provide for you, which then results in a decreased quality of life. You might find yourself engaging in unsafe sex, unhealthy coping mechanisms to really self soothe because you don't know how to self soothe. We're going to get to that. I will help you with that. And also emotional distress. And here we're really talking about shame and guilt, because shame and guilt, unfortunately, are embedded in body image issues. And when you're in that loop and you're shaming yourself for your decisions and you're feeling guilty afterwards, so you shame yourself for your eating, but because of your socioeconomic status, that's the best you got because it's expensive. And then you guilt yourself for not being able to eat better. So then you're probably going to eat more. That's that negative internal viewpoint I'm talking about. And then externally, unfortunately, there are labels placed on people who don't fit the status quo. So if you don't have the means to get a gym membership, because they're not always cheap, if you don't have the means to go and get the best of the best groceries, if you don't have the means to exercise every day because mentally you just don't have the willpower, you are called lazy, you're called unambitious. And this is, I don't know if this is just something I hear a lot in Alberta, freeloader. or I don't know if this is everywhere else as well. But, unfortunately, Holly, we are actually recording it. So, yes, it's going to be shared, probably on the ROC website. Chelsea will talk about that, not sure. And I know there's like 20 messages in the chat. I have not seen it. You're not being ignored. I will get to you, hopefully. But yeah, so that term of freeloader, I don't know if that's just like a Alberta thing, but I hear that a lot, especially pertaining to people who have visible and invisible disabilities, right? So it's okay, Holly, don't worry about it. Happens to the best of us. So here we're talking about people who are on AISH. And I know there's people outside of Alberta, so I'm not sure if it's called AISH where you are, but that's government assistance if you have disabilities and you're unable to work. We know that with being on AISH or being on any kind of income support, the income is very limited, unfortunately. And there is a lot of people who I really appreciate their vulnerability, but they talk about how their access to resources are very, very, very minimal when they are on this kind of income support due to disabilities, or just because they lost their job, or because, they had to take a stress leave for whatever the reason is. Their access to resources, unfortunately, is not always available and accessible. And is it fair then that those people are called these things and alienated by society and treated like they are, leeching off the society that's supposed to be helpful to them? It's not fair. And I just want to say, unfortunately, as we have seen with the inconsistency of the world, we know that disabilities are, we see it more often than we used to, right? We see people getting into mental health conditions that they can't get out of. So they have to get time off work. They have to go on medication. They have to take it seriously. With the inconsistencies of the world and literally a pandemic that turned everything off for everybody, we know that, unfortunately, visible and invisible disabilities are not something that you can't really shy away from it, because it could happen. So instead of pretending like it doesn't happen or that it's like out there, I think we should acknowledge that it can happen. And if it does happen, we should have more resources in place to support it. As it stands, there isn't a lot of resources for a lot of folks. And so if this is something that you can relate to because you're neurodivergent like me, and that is considered invisible visibility, or if that you have somebody that that has a visible disability, like who I said, my family member that is on bed rest, then you know that these people are alienated and outcasted. Imagine what that's doing on a social level to their body image. So that's that external and internal that I was talking about. So there's a term called the tripartite influence model, and that's that, the social influence does impact the way you see yourself, and eating disturbances. So again, if this is something, these slides, I know they're like gloomy, but this is not meant to make you feel bad. It's meant to give you reasons for why society wants you to feel bad about these things. And the reality is, if we can just rip the band-aid and see these for what they are, then we can actually seek assistance and seek support rather than pretending like they don't exist. Next slide, please. So there are researchers that say that body image is an evolutionary thing, because being more attractive and feminine meant that you are more fertile and you could have babies. And so this is not like accepted everywhere, but this is a theory that it could be that traditional gender roles that existed back in the day are still existing, because there's that like need for attraction for when it comes to women, and when it comes to men, there's either being a thin or muscular, and that's kind of it. Again, remember what I said, it's a spectrum of desirability and then not desirable. So this is just a theory. Some people disagree with this, but I just wanted to mention it, that it does exist. And so if this is the kind of theory that you were raised on, imagine what it does to you sociopolitically when you don't have the body image that you wish you had, or that you were told that you should have. It's going to impact you. So I just think it's wild that we prepare people to have low self-esteem depending on what they look like, when people are so much more than what they look like. And what they look like is not just because they follow the biggest trends or the cosmetic procedures. But again, it's the sociopolitical status, it's the cultures, it's the religions, it's their upbringing, all of that. So when you see people, they're a package deal, you know what I mean? And so some people disagree with this theory, some people agree with it, but I just wanted to mention it. It is a theory. Next slide, please. So with all of this that I just mentioned, with the socialization, with the psychology, and with that theory, it makes sense why folks would internalize all of this, right? That it makes sense why it would become your narrative. You're taking it from the outside and it like brainwash. And so, there's two trends of internalization that are more popular, and one is thin internalization, and we see that throughout the world. This, idea of wanting to be thin, even in cultures that bigger bodies are more accepted. Sometimes we see those that are thin are the ones that are elite or those that have more wealth. We'll talk about that later. Or this desire to have, a lean but muscular body if you don't identify as a woman. So these are just, you know, things that we see. But of course, there's intersectionalities. And with gender roles being challenged and with identities being challenged, this research is also going to be challenged because, as you can see, the research thus far is very much a binary. And so there's a lot of work to be done for folks that are non-binary and do not, identify as just a woman or a man. We're going to talk about that. But everybody agrees, though, thus far in all of the research, is that there is a difference in how people want to be seen, but everybody wants to be seen. That is an innate psychological desire that we have because we are social creatures as human beings, and we do want to be accepted, and we do crave community and identity and belonging. But unfortunately, there's a lot of spaces that outcast us because of the way we look, which is wild and not okay. Next slide, please. And so just a little bit more on that, you will see that there's a lot of language in these slides talking about, women and feminine and men, and that is a binary thing. And I recognized while doing these slides that excluding a non-binary voice and excluding transgender voices, excluding voices that are gender neutral is harmful, and it can be harmful, especially if your upbringing has been one that excluded it as well. And so if that is you, just recognizing when you are getting that input of social media influence, body image, commercials, et cetera, the people that are speaking probably can't even relate to you. You know what I mean? Because they haven't really even sat down with somebody of your identity to think about the way your identity's voice should be in that policy making, in the decision making. And that also, exclusion also results in further dysphoria. And this could be an identity dysphoria. Of course, if you don't see yourself being represented in the media, that is going to impact your body image as well because you're going to feel further outcasted. So this is an area that is being challenged now, and I'm here for the challenging. Next slide, please. So with everything that I just said, it makes sense why folks would develop something called appearance rejection sensitivity. This is not to be confused with just rejection sensitivity, which is a neurodivergent thing. But appearance rejection sensitivity is when your appearance has been scrutinized since literally being in the womb. I don't know if you've noticed, but when pregnant women, there are specific pregnant bodies that are more desirable than others. Like it literally starts from the womb. And then, there's this need for women to bounce back after literally creating life. And, unfortunately, there's a lot of minors online. And I know a lot of these apps are trying to work around that. But the reality is there are still minors that are online. And it's weird that adults can comment on their bodies, but they do. And, I saw this like girl yesterday that came on Instagram Reels, and I don't even know her, but she's probably like 13, 14. I think it's weird that like I feel like I shouldn't see that. Like I just feel like there should be a divide here. But anyways, she was talking about her nail polish. She was very excited to share her nail polish. And as an influencer, we are unfortunately trained to see comments because that's like engagement, that's how it works. So I wanted to leave her a positive comment, but then I saw the comments and they were body shaming her. And she's probably like 13, 14, just talking about nail polish. Imagine. Now, for a lot of us who are millennials or Gen X or boomers, we didn't have that kind of a social media thing, but I remember I used to I had a J14 subscription, which was like Cosmopolitan. And it was all about body and stuff too. So it doesn't really matter. But with social media, I feel like it's more in our face. And so I say that to say that is an early onset of social programming that is happening to this 13-year-old. We see that on social media a lot, but even off social media, we see it in traditions and families. And so what happens is you're going to start attributing your self-worth to these messages. And if you can't relate to these messages, you're going to think that you don't belong, and it's going to result in self-harm, negative self-image, etc. And then as an adult, what happens is sometimes you become a people pleaser and you want to please everybody. And so what happens is you get into relationships that probably mimic the negativity that you've taken in, or you decide to opt out of relationships altogether and you decide to, you know, be in your solitude, but you actually do crave. Some people actually are okay with being alone, but there are people who choose that not because they want to, but because they have a fear of rejection about their appearance. And then another step further is what we're seeing is this rise of cosmetic surgery and now premature anti-aging. If you're on TikTok, women who are in their 30s are getting shamed by minors. Once again, it's weird that there's minors commenting, but whatever. They're getting shamed by minors because, minors are like, why do you look like that? Why are you so old? And they're like 30, 40. And so again, if you already come from an upbringing in which, a specific look without wrinkles, doesn't appeal to you, you're going to want to start getting premature anti-aging. What I appreciate is there are dermatologists that actually are like, you're not ready for this. You're too young. We're not doing Botox. But then there are those that profit off the system. And then we saw, in the last 5 years, the trend was BBLs, right? We saw that they're, Brazilian butt lift, I think that's what it's called, surgery. And now it's reverse BBL. So now people are getting it removed. So I hope that you can see thus far that if you try to base your value on these standards, you're never going to be satisfied because it doesn't remain. And the BBL baddies that were appreciated 5 years ago, a lot of them are no longer appreciated because now it's no longer cool to have a BBL. Now it's cool to have that lean reverse BBL look, which means you have to take out the BBL. And BBL surgery is extremely, extremely dangerous. There have been so many influencers that have died because of it. But they did it, we don't know their stories, but it was probably because of their appearance, rejection, sensitivity. So just know that when you're seeing these trends, there are corporations and industries that are hoping to profit off of your insecurity. And for me, I do a lot of things out of spite. This is one of them. So one of the things I do out of spite is you will not get a penny out of my insecurity. I'm going to, you know, use that money into healing from this negative loop. But that money will go to, a professional that can help me or resources that can help me, and not to you who's going to profit off the system. This is not to shame people who get cosmetic surgery. This is not to shame people who get anti-aging procedures done. You do what you got to do. But if that's not you, I want you to know that's okay too. And if that is you and you've decided to start getting cosmetic surgery and premature anti-aging, just know that if you're doing it for you, that's wonderful. But if you're doing it for, oh, thank you, Elise. Thank you. Thank you. Just know that if you're doing it for the world is not going to appreciate you in a couple of years. You know, who knows? Maybe in 5 years it'll be cool to have wrinkles. I don't know. Maybe it'll be cool. And then maybe people will getting cosmetic surgeries to have wrinkles. I don't know. There was that like buccal fat thing that was happening a few years ago where people were removing like this area. And again, there's research that says like this is bad. And then there's people who are like, but there's money in it, so I'll do it even though it's bad. And if you die, you die. You're going to sign the waiver. It's not my fault. So just know that the messaging that you're receiving is very seldom about your well-being. It's very seldom because these companies care about you, and more so because they want to make a profit. The way to know if they care about you is, are they taking into account the way these procedures outcast people? Because these procedures are not covered by most, insurances. A lot of people have to pay out of pocket. So that already puts people in an elite status, is that you're able to even provide the income to do the surgery. Then it's, do you have the needs to sustain it, to maintain it, And so again, I hope nobody feels shamed. I'm totally the least judgmental person you'll ever meet, and I promise you that. If if you have chosen to get surgery done, I just hope it's for you. And if you've chosen not to get surgery done, I hope it's for you. That's all I gotta say. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the socialization of beauty real quick. So we're gonna do this real quick. I'm going missing some eras here, but I just wanted to pick on the influential ones, more influential ones. So in the Elizabethan era, we're talking about fair complexion. Um, Queen Elizabeth was known for being super fair, super pale. That's the terms that they use, not me. And unfortunately, darker skin was correlated to lower status. How does that impact us today? Well, there's a lot of makeup companies that still don't have range of pigment and shades. There's a lot of makeup companies that still will not provide the appropriate shade for their consumers. There's a lot of makeup artists that will show up to some client's house with improper shades. There's a lot of tokenization, of diversity and inclusion, but you can see that they actually are not inclusive or diverse in the way they're hiring. If you have a name that is considered foreign, um, and you also don't look racially ambiguous, there are barriers against you. So that's going to impact your body image as well. And how we're seeing that play out currently, if you're on TikTok, is the bold glamour filter. I don't know if you remember that, but there's a lot of people that were against that because they were saying that it distorted a lot of features to make them look more Western. And here we're talking about, the bigger eyes, the lighter color, jaw being more defined, nose being smaller. And that nose thing is, nose surgeries are so not important, but so influential. I am Iranian, as Chelsea said, and we are considered the nose capital of the world. Most Iranians, I think it's like 80% of Iranians get a nose job. And it's to look more European. And there, and now you're probably looking at my nose and like, did she get one? No, I didn't. But that's because I do things out of spite. So I refuse to contribute. um, but a lot of my family members got nose jobs. And in Iran, it's a status of beauty and it's a status of wealth. If you got money to get a nose job, you're doing well in life. But it's not just Iran, because we see that in the music industry too. The majority of influencers and entertainers have gotten nose jobs. And so, so we see that that's still happening from the Elizabethan era. Oh, and skin bleaching. And, I know that in a lot of South Asian countries, there's a cream called Fair and Lovely, and it's like a skin bleaching cream. So there's that too, and that influence comes from here. Next slide, please. So then we talk about socialization of ethnicity. Here, I'm going to talk about a lot of, this is also a really good article. The reference is at the end, but here we're talking about a lot of Asians and talking about how Eurocentric standards of beauty have impacted them. So we see a lot of, eyelid surgery happening in Chinese, Japanese, Korean countries. Again, the nose thing is a lot of people want that Western nose. The makeup thing is interesting because there's a lot of desire for that youthful, innocent look and a lot of Asian trends, but we don't see that as much in the West. But what we do see is that we do see a trend in pornography in which, the younger the porn stars look, the more successful they are because they feed into a fantasy, and you know what the fantasy is. So there is also a similarity there, but it's interesting because that also, though, there's this desire for that lighter skin complexion as well, hence the skin whitening products. And small face, petite body, and small feet. Again, um, if you don't fit into that, sucks to be you. But it doesn't suck to be you. You just need to work on unlearning that. And that is also seen a lot in the Middle East as well. There's a lot of fat phobia in a lot of Middle Eastern countries. I can speak to Iran, trust. I've always been the biggest one in the room when I visit. And, until you unlearn that, it's going to hurt you. And with the feet thing, I recall thinking what Chelsea say here. Had no clue where that came from. Yeah. And also, that if your feet are not small, having small feet is a privilege because you can get kids' shoes, right? It's cheaper to get kids' shoes. But if you have bigger feet, or you're a bigger bodied person, it's going to be hard for you to get clothes, right? There's a lot of clothes that only go up to a specific, size, and same with shoes. So, but what if you can't afford that? What if you can't afford to get some custom made size? Like, that's unfair. So again, when these companies are telling you about your body image, most of the time they don't care about you. You care about you. Next slide. ROC cares about you. Sogand cares about you. They don't care about you. Next slide, please. So real quick, we're going to talk about the socialization of skin here. Hi, Victoria. Shout out to Victoria. Dr. Burns is in the house. She's amazing. She cares about you. So in the socialization of skin, here we're talking about the trend of metrosexual men. This is a beautiful trend in which men are shamelessly taking care of their skin. And, a lot of them are using makeup products. We're seeing this in a lot of Middle Eastern influencers. I see this and it makes me very happy. But there's still a lot of judgment towards men that take care of their appearance because their upbringing, a lot of men have been taught that you're only good to provide. So if you can't provide, you're going to spend money on skincare? What? You're not man enough. You're not man enough. That's the messaging. And so these men, it's going to impact their body image because they're not going to be able to treat the acne. They're not going to be able to treat the textured skin. They're not going to be able to learn to love the skin they're in when society is telling them you're only here for one thing, and that's not beauty. It's not true. So this is exciting, but it's still very new because it started in the 2000s in the West. We do see it taking over in places, in other places, but this one's slow. But it's exciting because masculinity is being challenged, and I'm here for it. Next slide, please. So real quick, we're going to talk about colonization, though. Someone said, if you don't take care of yourself, you can only provide a percentage of your potential. Absolutely, Adrienne. Absolutely. Here we're talking about colonization and the standards of beauty. And absolutely, men are beautiful. But even the word beautiful has become like not gender neutral, right? Like I know every time, like if I work with like a client and I see them, putting themselves down, I'll say like, but you're beautiful. And they'll be like, like they're not used to that. They're used to being called like, you're a provider. And that's great. That's great that you can provide. That's great that you can defend. That's wonderful. But you also, like, if you look good, give them their flowers. You know what I mean? Colonization, here we're talking about the fact that, unfortunately, a lot of the trends that we saw during slavery is still happening, in that people who were lighter were always the ones that were not working outside. People with darker skin were working outside. But now we see with colorism in the music industry, we see the fact that a lot of celebrities, their skin tone changes. And there's a lot of Black content creators. Like, this is what I do for fun. I watch gossip tea channels. This is my Roman Empire. I watch gossip tea channels, and they're always Black women talking about the industries, and how in the music industry, there's this movement now to accept your natural hair, but in the real world, that isn't always taken well, because relaxed hair, right, is what people want to see. or the fact that there's a lot of celebrities that preach self-love and self-acceptance, and a lot of them even have makeup brands, but they themselves, a lot of these Black content creators will talk about how over the years their skin has gotten lighter. So how are you preaching self-love and self-acceptance but promoting colorism, right? So if you ever want to learn about this, there's so many content creators that are Black doing incredible work in this area of talking about how the impacts of colonization are still here, the impacts of slavery are still here, and we have to decolonize if we actually want to see people for who they are and silence those words of whiteness is better and being lighter is better. So that also is a really good resource. You can see it at the end. Next slide, please. And lastly, we're going to talk about marketing. And here, so we talked a lot about marketing, but here essentially it's the fact that they are using psychological manipulation to get to you. Essentially, as we've talked about, they really don't care about you, but they care about getting that money. And if you hate yourself, they can get money off your back. The more you hate yourself, the more money they can get. The more you hate yourself, the more their revenue is increasing, right? And then once they see, there's a trend on TikTok right now called blockout celebrities. And so a lot of people are blocking celebrities. And now you're seeing a lot of celebrities scrambling to actually pretend like they care about people. So now they're coming out and like, we're living in trying times. But, people can see through that. Another thing that I want you to always think about is the fact that there's mass hysteria and fear mongering in social programming. So it's always like, if you don't use this sunscreen, this one sunscreen that's $25, you don't use this one, you're going to have like this kind of skin, and this kind of skin makes you not, attractive to the masses. So there's this like fear mongering and making you like guilt tripping you. Maybe it's Maybelline, like guilt tripping you into buying what it is, so that you don't accept who you are, but you accept this facade that this brand is giving you. And so now what it looks like now is this like empowerment. Now it's empowerment. But I just wanted to leave you with this from this slide is, how are you empowering anybody unless you're telling them first that they're disempowered without you? So any company out here on these streets that is acting like they're empowering, you got to ask yourself, why did they think I was disempowered in the first place? That sounds like a social hierarchy. Sounds like my upbringing. Sounds like what I was trained to believe. I don't know if I want to subscribe to this. Next slide. And fat phobia. Oh yes, fat phobia. We've already kind of touched on this, but it's this assumption that if somebody's in a bigger body that they've just given up on life. And as I told you, that's just not the case, and that's just not true. And I had to stop my music because we're almost at the end. I don't even know if you knew, but I had music on this whole time. Just a shameless plug, 396 hertz music is really good for decreasing your stress levels. So whenever I have a presentation, I have something like that on. But speaking on stress levels, a lot of people can't decrease their stress levels, and so they gain weight. There's a lot of people that don't even eat a lot during the day and they still gain weight because they're chronic stress, fat phobia, and that like need for losing weight and fat loss doesn't ever talk about that. Doesn't ever talk about how you're managing your stress, because you can be on the best of the best diet, have the best of the best personal trainer, but if you don't know how to manage your stress, that weight's not going to stay off. It's going to come back. Next slide. So this is just a quick CBT practice. Like I said, you're going to get these slides because this is being recorded, but this is really important. Just like if, you're on the streets and you get triggered because you see an advertisement, somebody makes a comment, you get treated unjustly at work, whatever, pull something like this up, make 4 columns and ask yourself, okay, what's my body image telling me right now? You're not worthy. Why? Because you look a specific way. Is this me? Is this a my thought, or is this what the society is telling me thought? What that does is it tells you how much of this narrative is in your control and how much is not. And the reality is most of it is not, because you're taking the stimuli consistently. Once you're able to separate that, then you can self-soothe your nervous system and take your nervous system from that fight or flight into rest and digest. There are so many ways to take it from that, and you should do this many times a day, because we are being bombarded by messages of not being enough many times a day. And so if you can get into a habit of challenging these messages, you're going to see that they're nothing without you. They're nothing. These companies are nothing without your self-hate. They're nothing without your self-destructive behaviors. They're not. So once you can see that and catch that and start self-soothing and start healing from the negativity that has been placed on you, you will see that you're actually more powerful than you think. And that like negative body image stance that you've always been taught you had is actually a facade. It's a facade. Unsubscribe. You know those emails that you're going to get unsubscribe? Unsubscribe. And this is easier said than done because this is only a 40-minute presentation. Obviously, I'm simplifying it. It's going to be a journey, but it's either you're going to take a journey to continuous self-loathing, like the Grinch. You know, I'm busy today because I'm self-loathing on Monday and I'm self-loathing on Tuesday, you know, or you're going to take this journey towards decolonizing, de-influencing, and you know, really learning where these messages come from. And when you can see that they come from sexism, misogyny, racism, all the bad isms, you will see that it's not really worth your time anymore. And then why contribute to it? It's going to take time, but it's possible. I'm, you know, living proof it's possible. Next slide. So, you know, people always tell me, well, what's the point of talking to somebody? It's not going to reverse this. No, it's not going to reverse this, but it's what's going to do, it's going to at least help challenge those fixed beliefs you have about yourself. And so, yeah, you know, talking to someone like me who's a mental health professional, I'm not a surgeon. I can't be out here, you know, going in and, you know, doing what needs to be done, or you think what needs to be done. But in your brain, I can do what needs to be done and try to rewire that negative imaging and that negative, you know, um, that negative feedback loop that's happening. And so I just want you to know that you're not alone. You know, I think there was like 124 or something participants here. A lot of them didn't come, but they're going to be tuning in later. That's 124 people just listening to this just today. Just imagine how many people are impacted by this. I think everybody. So it's important to know you're not alone, because that defeats that alienation narrative that has been taught to you that you're like by yourself because you look the way you do. The reality is most of us are in this boat. And so once you accept that, you know that, you know, change is possible and there is help. There's a lot of us that are willing to help you and find ways, you know, to shift your nervous system. Because what happens whenever you get triggered is, oh, thanks, Julia. There's a heart. Yay. Um, there's a lot of, oh, that matched my nails. There's a lot of messaging that's against you, but there's a lot of people that are in this wave now of unlearning these messages. So there's ways to get out of this. Remember, I told you we're going to start off gloomy and we're going to end nicely. So that's what I mean. I want you to feel powerful about yourself, right? This is not the end all. Yes, it's had a lot of negative impact in the world, but within you, yeah, you can't maybe change all of the people in the world, but you can start within yourself. And I promise you, once you start challenging these beliefs, the people around you will do the same. It's like a domino effect. It's really cool. Next slide, please. We're almost there. I know time's running out, so I'm trying to like do it quick sticks. So there are some resources that I want you to look into. As it stands right now, the UK is doing a lot of incredible work in body dysmorphia. They have an online support group that you don't have to be in the UK. I have a friend who has body dysmorphia, and it's like on Mondays during lunchtime or something. Don't quote me on that, but essentially it's a free group. It's a bunch of people who have body dysmorphia. Now, you don't actually have to have body dysmorphia to relate to this, right? Body dysmorphia is, you know, it's a clinical term. But if you feel like you would benefit from support, the UK has incredible resources. But there's other resources. There's trainings, there's workshops, there's webinars, there's books, there's worksheets. There's a lot of help out there. So again, you're not alone. Once you embark on this journey, you'll see that there's actually a lot of communities there out there for you. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, so those are the references. Body Peace. Oh, that's amazing, Chelsea. Good, I'm so glad. And okay, so I told you I have a promise or a surprise for you. And I don't know if Victoria's in the house still. Dr. Burns is in the house. But so if you go on any of my socials, Sogand and Wellness with Sogand, I have 2 TikToks and 2 Instagrams. I have a link tree. In my link tree, currently, you can book a discovery call with me. That's $9.99 For the participants here, it's not $9.99. Your discovery call is free. If you want to, have a call with me, I'm waiving that fee because I want to help, and obviously you care and your intentions are good. So what you can do is email me at wellnesswithsogand@gmail.com and just let me know that you were in this, so I know where you're coming from. And if you want to collab, if you want to work together, whether it's being my client or being my partner, whatever, professionally, of course. We could do that. Also, my second surprise for you is I have 40 slides of worksheets that I've worked on with neurodivergence in mind. Of course, you don't have to be a neurodivergent person to benefit. And these slides are like worksheets that you could just use. And I'm waiving the fee of that as well for participants of this ROC. So if you want any of that for your help, send me an email. Let me know you're coming from here. I'd love to connect. And I just really want to thank you for your time. This is so important for me. I wish when I was younger, there was a presentation like this from me. I think maybe I would have started healing not in my late 20s, maybe in my early 20s. So I just want to thank ROC. Thank you, Dr. Burns. She's still with us. Thank you, Chelsea, for having me. And I hope to be back. And I'm done.
That was incredible. Thank you so much. I put the email in the chat. I can put it again for Sogand.
Thanks
Yeah.
again. Sorry I was late. I'm glad I was able to come in. Thank you so much for coming, and thanks everyone. This was a great turnout.
Oh, it was so much fun. I enjoyed it.